Hey, read through the word. Today is February 1st. Can you believe it? We're in February already. Oh my goodness. Okay, here we are. Guess what? Into Exodus we go. I'm so excited. Okay, Exodus. I am calling this lesson, but ... because we got a lot to talk about what's going on with our guy Moses here. So we have actually a lot of reading today. We cover a lot of ground, and it's one of those where, we had our old verse, and I know I do this all the time. I don't mean to do it, but I know I do. It's just the way I know. I have taught for years out of the ESV study Bible, really thick Bible. Mine is actually, I keep it on my cart at school, and that thing's falling apart. The cover's off of it and everything. So I've taught so much out of it that most of what comes out of me is out of ESV, and I know we're in NLT, but sometimes I like the way the ESV says some things. And so before that, your old verse today, it says, "Eventually a king came to power in Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done." So that was our old verse for today. Something old that we knew. ESV says it like this. There came a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. I like that. So we have this whole idea that now remember when we talked about band of brothers, that this band of brothers is not a family of 12 sons anymore. And when they went down to Egypt, when we closed the book of Genesis, there were 70 of them down in Egypt. And now, oh my goodness, the number most people go out of is by the time we get to the actual Exodus out of Egypt, there's 2 million. So, whoa, we have grown. Remember, that was the point. We were growing. So, we go through all that. We talk about slavery. We meet a guy named Moses who was born into a Hebrew family, but because the Pharaoh is out to kill all the Hebrew boys, he is put into he's put into a basket. That's one of those word studies. If you are a word study person, I would tell you, go study that word right there. The actual word that's used for the basket he's put in. I'm not going to talk about it. You chase that one on your own. Y'all word people will love it. And comment back and tell me what you learned. So that's one of the great ones to chase. But we have that. He grows up in the Pharaoh's household, and then he kills somebody and he's off on the run. So that was your synopsis of what all we've read today. And so all of these things are happening. And then we come to Moses, what we call Moses in the burning bush, where God reveals himself to Moses and actually reveals his name. Remember back in Genesis, when Jacob and God were wrestling, and God asked, the angel of the Lord is what it says, when they're wrestling, and he asked Jacob for his name, and because he makes him say he's a deceiver. And then they wrestle, and Jacob asked the angel of the Lord, or wrestling God, for his name, and he didn't give it to him. Wouldn't give it to him. Now he's going to get it. So I've got a few things for you today. One thing is there's a video link I want you to see. I'm a big fan of a ministry called the Bible Project, and they have a great video on the name of God, because I'm not going that way with the lesson today about Yahweh and what that means and everything. So go watch that lesson. Go watch that. It's really great. Another thing I want us to look at with Moses. Okay, D.L. Moody, who's a famous evangelist, has this quote, and I love it. It says this: Moses spent 40 years thinking he was somebody, 40 years learning he was nobody, and 40 years discovering what God can do with a nobody. So that's the life of Moses. We're picking up Moses right here at this. That for 40 years, he lives in the palace of Egypt, thinking he is everything. He is the, a prince of Egypt. That's how he's living. And then he's on the run for the next 40 years of his life as a shepherd in Midian. And then now we're going to meet him again. So we meet Moses, and time has flown. He's basically 80 years old at this point. And so we meet Moses. God presents himself in a bush that burns but does not burn up. And Moses is like, what is this about? I love the way the NLT says that he wonders about what's causing this. Well, let's go take a look. So this conversation. So God reveals himself with his personal name to Moses. And then he proceeds to tell Moses, hey, I have been preparing you for your entire life for a job. And Moses says, yeah, I don't want it. Because it's not going to look like what Moses thought his life would look like. He's like, I'm happy out here with the sheep. I always say that Moses spent 40 years tending sheep because he's going to end up spending 40 years with people who were dumb like sheep wandering in a desert. So as we look at this, of what Moses expected out of his life and what God was offering, for Moses to be used for the plan of God, for all of these things that are going to happen over the next year of his life, a little bit longer than a year that all of this takes place in. But God calls Moses as a deliverer for his people. Moses is uniquely qualified for the job that God has given him. He knows what it's like to live in the palace of Pharaoh. He knows Pharaoh. He's been trained in reading and writing in different languages, which will come handy when he writes Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So he's been trained in all of these different ways. He comes to know the Hebrew God. He knew the things of the Egyptians. God has uniquely used every experience to set him up for this moment where God will use him for his purposes. But Moses says, yeah, So that's what, but God, but that's what he does. So Moses has excuses, and God's not going to let him do it. And God has answers. So, I want to, let's look. It says, Moses asked, so he's like, who am I? Like, why in the world? Who am I to be going to talk to these people? So God, and so that's Exodus 3:11. And God answers in Exodus 3:12. And he says, Moses says, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people out of Israel out of Egypt? And God answered, I will be with you. And this is your sign. I'm the one who has sent you. So he tells him that. The next thing he's like, okay, I'm going, but who are you, God? I mean, who should I tell him has sent me? And he says, Moses said, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they'll ask me, okay, what's his name? What should I tell them? And then God answers. God replies to Moses, I am who I am. Go watch the video I linked. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob has sent me to you. And then the next one, Moses says, what happens if they don't believe me? So Exodus 4:1, I think that's right. 4:1 back. Yes, it says, but Moses protested again. What if they don't believe me or listen to me? What if they say the Lord's never appeared to you? And so God answers in Exodus 4:2-9. Then the Lord asked him, what's that in your hand? A shepherd's staff. So he proceeds to tell him how the staff is going to be used. And that will make them know that God is with him. And then the next thing he's like, okay, all right, I've done those 3. What's next? He's like, yeah, I have a problem with talking. I can't talk. I have a speech problem. And I really don't think I can do this. He says, Then 4:10, but Moses pleaded with the Lord, Lord, I'm not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now. Even though you've spoken to me, I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled. And then God answers in verses 11 and 12. The Lord asked Moses, who makes a person's mouth? I made your mouth, Moses. I can put the words in it. That's the point. I am with you. I will give you the words to say. And then the last thing he's like, yeah, just let me out of this. There's got to be somebody that can do this. In 4:13 he says, but the Lord again, Moses again pleaded, hey, Lord, send anyone else. Anyone else. Then the Lord became angry with Moses. All right, he said, what about your brother, Aaron the Levite? And so he continues to tell him, Aaron's going to be the one to help him. Now, that's going to come back to get him, that he's got to take his brother with him to handle some stuff, because Aaron's going to have some problems once we get out into the wilderness. Spoiler. But all of these things, he kept trying to get out of. And the point God was making to Moses is, I have prepared you through everything in your life for this very moment. And I will take you and use you for my purposes. All you need to do is obey. And I think it's the same thing that works for us today. We think preparation for things of God looks totally different than it actually does. I think many times we can look back in life, once we're in a work that we know God's prepared for us, then we can see, oh, I see how he was preparing me for this. But God's idea for preparation for service looks very different from ours. And you know who he uses? The least likely. That's the story of the Bible. He uses the least likely so that God will get the glory. It's a very good thing for us to read and look at the excuses we make with the opportunities God puts before us when all we need to do is obey. See you next time on Read Through the Word.